And I had a late night last night. Patty and I watched the final episode of White Lotus and drank a little champagne. So my voice sounds a little scraggly. I'm a little tired, but the bread has to get made. It's almost St. Patrick's Day, and we're going to be making Rye Caraway Sourdough to go with our New England boiled dinner. I'm so excited. One of my favorite meals, and I love to have rye bread with it. I love Irish soda bread too, but today we're going to be doing Rye Caraway Sourdough. And the first thing we always have to do when making our sourdough is feed Madra. Madra is the name of my sourdough starter, which I started Madra 3 years ago now. I've been making sourdough bread, and the first thing you need to do is make your starter. And making your initial sourdough starter is about a 5-day process. It's very simple, very easy, and it's totally worth it because this sourdough starter will outlive you. And every week she treats me well. If I feed her, she allows me to make beautiful sourdough bread. But the key is the maintenance. So you have to know that from the beginning, that you've got to feed your sourdough. Once a week is my normal. And this is like what it looks like when she comes out of the fridge. It's a little liquidy, which is fine. Sometimes there's liquid on top. This actually doesn't look too liquidy, but there's a lot in there, and we're not gonna use all that to feed her. So I have a little jar here. I'm gonna pour off a lot of this excess, they call it discard dough, and I'm not gonna throw it out. You know me, frugal. Everybody should be using their discard dough, and there's plenty of recipes that we'll talk about in future episodes. But all that discard dough is great for pancakes and pizza dough, which I make a lot of pizza dough with my discard. So we're just going to put the discard aside for now and save it and work on feeding Madra. So you can see there's not even a 1/4 cup left. It's about 10 or 20 grams of starter in there, which is perfect. And we are going to put Madra on our food scale and set it to grams and turn it to 0 to start. And I feed that amount of starter with equal parts bread flour. I'm using King Arthur flour today, and spring water. Do not use chlorinated water, as it will kill the natural bacteria that you need to flourish. So spring water, and it's going to be warm, about 85 or so degrees. But you can feel it with your finger that it's warm. I've warmed that up. So first I add the 70 grams of bread flour. Usually I use a different bread flour, and I'm gonna do a whole episode just on flours because there's so many artisanal farms out there making the greatest flour. So that's 70 grams. I just ran out. That's why I have the King Arthur today, which is fine. And then I have 70 grams of warm water, spring water. I just made a boo-boo. Set it back to 0. That's all right. So I'm only going to go up to about 65 because I had put some in there. Okay. This will be 70 grams. And then you're just going to stir it around. You're not whipping it, you're just making sure that all the flour is coated in the water. Everything is coated. That's good. Okay, take that excess off. And then we're gonna put the top back on and move the little rubber band, which I have. It's good to use a marker. I just use a rubber band, and here's the starting level. And what will happen is, as this starts to bubble and get active because it's being fed, the level is going to rise up at least double in size, and sometimes even higher. And you want to use it at its peak height. So you're going to watch it, but it's going to take a few hours. And I already have one over here. I keep it warm and cozy. I warm up the stove a little, and then I put it on the burner, I should say. I warm up the burner, and then I turn it off, just so, you're not gonna cook it. And then I wrap it in the cozy towels. And I'm gonna put this one right in next to the other Madra. I always have 2 going at once. And they can stay cozy, and they're gonna start to bubble up and rise. And every once in a while, I'm gonna check on them over the next few hours, and I may just turn it on to high and turn it back down just to keep it a little warm under there. So we'll check back with you in probably 2 or 3 hours, and then we'll start our Rye Caraway dough together. That's all I need. I don't need. It's been 3 hours and my starter has doubled in volume. And if you can see, it's nice and bubbly, just what you want. And we are ready to make up our shaggy dough. That's what it's called. So what I'm gonna do, we're making the rye sourdough. So I have mixed together my flours. I have a mix of 4 flours in here right now. I'm just sort of, I don't usually do this, I'm just being particular today. I'm mixing them around. I usually just throw them in. But I first got into sourdough baking and I turned to tartine bread because they are just the masters. And Jennifer Latham, I'm sure many of you out there know her. She's just a phenomenal baker, and I loved watching her videos to learn how to make sourdough at the very beginning several years ago. So I started using the rye, their country rye recipe, and I've tweaked it a little to what's easier for me to remember. And my sister Peggy and I, we bake bread virtually together. She's in Massachusetts, but she first turned me on to a much easier recipe because I have trouble remembering things these days. My portions, don't worry about it, my portions for the shaggy dough we're gonna mix up are 600, 400, 200. Couldn't be easier. So 600 of the flours, 400 of the water, and 200 of the starter. So I never forget. So no matter what bread I'm making, I just mix up the mix of different flours, but it has to equal 600 grams. And I don't vary this. The water is always 400 and the starter is 200. So today, I put in here 600 grams of flour. I've got a mix of rye, white bread flour, whole wheat, and a little spelt. I like that mix, and I love the spelt, gives a little nuttiness. But it all together equals 600 grams, and I will put that in the notes for the recipe. So we're gonna start with our warm spring water, 200 grams. That goes in first. It's 200. I'm sorry, 400. I swear. Okay, you know what, let's start again. 100 grams of water to start. And then I wet my fingers because I'm going to need to get the dough out. And then 200 grams of my starter. Look at it's so alive. See that? Got a nice structure. So 200 grams. And see how it's floating? The float test means that it was ready and it had, been activated enough. See how if it's sunk, it wouldn't have been ready. That's lovely. So that was, I lost track of what it was. I put in 400, I have to get to 600. We're just gonna make it. I always come pretty close on having enough. That's perfect. And I see I only have a little bit left in there. That is beautiful. So that now, I'm gonna just mix this gently with my hand. You don't have to be crazy, but you wanna incorporate the starter into the warm water. Just loosely, just break up the clumps. And then I'm going to reset so that I make sure, I'm going to reset this to 0 when I add the 600 grams of flour into this so that I know I'm doing it right. So here we go with the flour, right into the warm water and starter. Yep, 600, perfect. And then, so we're done. Well, we're gonna measure our salt in a second, but I have this really handy, which I love, the bread whisk.
You know, you can do it with your hands. People love that, do it with your hands, that's fine too. But I personally, because this dough gets really like sticky on your hands. It's like cement almost. It's hard to get off. So I love this whisk I got from Breadtopia, but you can pick them up a lot of places. But look at how nicely it just incorporates the water and the starter together. And I did for show, I used this glass bowl. I usually use a bigger metal bowl, but I figured you guys couldn't see it. So today I'm using a little smaller bowl, but normally I'd use a bigger one. And look at how it's, get down close. This is shaggy, now it's coming into the shaggy. I called it a shaggy dough. You see how we're not going to keep mixing this, over mixing it. We're just trying to get the flours moistened, and then time is going to do the rest while it sits. But you don't want to overwork this right now. I'm just getting everything coated. All the flours are moistened, and we're almost there. A little more off the bottom. That's why I love this tool. Look at how I can scrape on the bottom. Perfect. It's nice and shaggy. Oh, and it's warm. I mean, there's nothing better than making warm bread. Look at that. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to cover, see what I told you about it's really messy, but that's cool. Now we're going to cover our shaggy dough. I use these nice handy, it looks like a shower cap, but they can be washed, and I'm not wasting plastic, single-use plastic. We don't want that. We're going to cover this, and it's going to sit in a warm spot. It's Miami, so the kitchen is warm. It's going to sit for about 40 minutes. You could go up to about an hour, but because we're running late on time today, we're going to let it sit for 40 minutes. So we'll be back then. So in preparation for the next step, in about 40 minutes, we are going to be adding in about this 15 grams. I use a nice sea salt, a fine sea salt. 15. Perfect. 15 grams, and that's going to go in on our next step. You were wondering what that snortling noise was in the background while I was making my shaggy dough. It was our lovely little Salty. She was enjoying her late lunch, so I'm sorry about that, but she has to eat. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to show you, I've got some warm water here and some caraway seeds, and you don't have to put them in your rye, but I love the taste and the aroma. The smell of caraway, it's just perfect with rye bread. So I'm going to put in, well, I'm kind of liberal, put about a palmful of caraway seeds, and this is called a soaker. So I just let the caraway seeds are gonna absorb the water, and in a little while we're gonna add them to the dough at a certain stage, but they need to sit for a while and soak up and plump up and get hydrated, and that's gonna add, these are just gonna add such a flavor and texture to our rye bread. It has been resting for 40 minutes now. And now it's time to add the salt. If we had added this salt earlier, well, it had hair. If we had added the salt earlier, it would have greatly slowed down the action of the enzymes, and we don't want to do that. So the 40 minutes gave it time for the enzymes to do what they need to do. I now have, I do some warm water on my hands. You always want to keep the dough warm when you're working with it. So, and I actually, because we're adding salt, I like to put a little warm water just to get it going. Okay, and the salt, I'm gonna add even a little more, but I just get it going, and then I add the salt. Looks like a lot, but it's necessary for this dough. I'm gonna add a little more water. And then we're gonna just start gently incorporating the salt into the dough. These gentle little, it's like squishy. This is actually really fun to do with kids. And I mentioned Jennifer Latham, and she has just come out with a fantastic baking bread with kids book. So you might want to, if you're interested in teaching your kids how to bake bread, she's the source. So this is it's also very therapeutic. Okay, so the salt feels like it's really in there nicely. And What we're gonna, now that the salt has been added, we're going to start the stretching and folding stage of the dough, which replaces kneading in the sourdough process. So the way you do it is you just gently start picking up the dough. It's a little loose right now. And I gotta say, people do stretch and folds differently. Mine is gonna look a little aggressive than what you are normally used to maybe seeing, but it works for me. So it's very loose and wet. I like to pick it up, stretch it, fold it. Stretch it, fold it. I learned this from Jennifer, and it always works. So, I try to get the dough off the bottom, get it all incorporated, and just kind of flinging it really. You'll see, each stretch and fold stage, you will see the dough really start coming together and looking like a nice pulled together dough. But right now it's a little wild and woolly, and you can feel all that moisture in there. But what we're doing in the stretching and folding is we're actually activating the gluten and strengthening the gluten network. So it's very important. And we're gonna do this stage that I'm showing you, the stretch and fold, is every 30 minutes we'll do it. So I'm almost done now. Stretch. I like to really get it. Adding some air in there. Okay, still a bit shaggy. Flip it over. And we're gonna put the cover back on, and we're gonna set the timer for 30 minutes. We'll see you back here in 30 minutes for the next stretch and fold. Okay, so while we're making bread, we still have to eat. And remember, in the last episode, I made the roasted red peppers. Well, we've just used the last of them on these beautiful arugula, prosciutto, fresh mozzarella salad. And I do not waste anything. I told you, in the jar was the leftover herb-infused olive oil, and I just mixed a little lemon juice in and a little vinegar, and now we have a perfect salad dressing to dress our salads. So we used everything. I mean, that olive oil that was in the jar with the red peppers and the herbs is just perfect for this salad. You see how easy though? There's just so much you can do. Just always have to be thinking. Look at that. Now, bon appetit. Okay, it's been another 30 minutes and it's time to add our soaker. Now, if we would just do a regular stretch and fold now, but because I'm making the caraway, the rye caraway, we're gonna add the soaker, which I've drained. There's a little liquid left in there. But at this stage, we're gonna add it in. And look how the dough's already changed. See how it's poofed up already? It's not shaggy. So in we go with that beautiful caraway. You can, oh, I wish you could smell this. It's great. Okay. And we're just gonna, I like to just work it in a little slowly at first, just kind of like how we did the salt too. Just work it in there, get it. I actually could have put even more caraway in, but that's all right. There's plenty. Before I start my stretch and fold, I'm just gonna sort of work in these seeds. The dough feels great. And I'm not going to do as aggressive of, this first stretch and fold is the most sort of aggressive. Now I'm gonna start slowing it down a bit and be a little more gentle. And then I'm gonna speed along the next 2 stretch and folds, so this is the last time. We'll see you on the other side when we're ready to shape the dough. But here we go, another stretch. last stretch and fold. And look at the change in the dough. It's bubbly on top. I give it that extra 2 hours now to finish the bulk fermentation and develop a little more. And you can tell I wet my fingers and I just poke. You see how it springs back? Poke. That tells you that it's done, it's ready with this phase. And we gave it a nice long time instead of rushing through the bulk fermentation. So now it's time to get it out of the bowl, and it's a little sticky, and put it onto our work surface. We have a nice clean work surface, and I just wet my bench scraper to make it easier to get out. And it's not as bad as once you get used to it, it's not bad. Peggy calls this blobby. Look at she's on about her 95th blobby. Look at how nicely it's got such a beautiful springiness to it, and look at it's hard to describe, but you got to make bread. Everyone out there, I hope you try this. It's coming out nicely. It's sticky, but we'll be able to work with it. You'll see. Get it all out. Nice, big, blobby. Okay. So now what you want to do, there's varying schools of thought. I think it's okay. I make it a little easier on me. I just put a little flour on top, because this top is actually going to turn out to be the bottom when we go into the Banetton, but you'll see as I go. This just takes out a little bit of the stickiness, but the flour is not going in the dough. Okay. A little flour on my hands. I'm going to use a bench scraper for this, and this, when you're a beginner, this is a little tricky part. We're going to pre-shape the dough now, and we're going to create a nice skin, a tight skin on it, and that skin and the tension we're going to create is going to give the dough, when it bakes, a nice oven spring. So watch, it'll just kind of come around. Sticky, it's okay. A little stickier than... Keep going. You see how it's already changing? Nice, look at the tension's already forming. Beautiful. Start to see some air bubbles coming along the top. And this is the rye. I use a lot of high hydration because I like that. Gives it nice crumb inside, but it's a little trickier to work with. And you saw how sticky it was at the beginning, but look how it's changed already. It's really shaped up, and I'm just continuing to shape it gently and pull it into a nice tight ball with tension. See how the bubble's forming? You're getting that tension on the skin, and that's important. So you don't want to overdo this, so I'm going to just now let it sit. Look how beautiful that has shaped up. I'm going to put a little bit more flour on top, and then we're going to cover this with a tea towel for about 20 minutes, because we just really worked that gluten around, and now we want to let it rest. Okay, 20 minutes, and we'll come back in 20 minutes and we're going to do our final shaping of the dough. We're almost there. Now, this process of making bread, you can see it's little tasks, but over a long time. I mean, it's taken us 5 hours today. So you have to be devoted to your bread. I like to do it on a Friday when I'm doing other things in the kitchen anyway. So it's not a headache, and it's not like I'm, spending the whole day. I'm doing other things. But just realize that when you start to commit to your bread making, that it is a day-long event, and then we will put it in the fridge to proof overnight, and I'll get up early in the morning with you all, and we'll bake it in the morning. So that, for me, that cycle works really well for my timing. Okay, the dough rested for 20 minutes, and we are now at the final shaping stage. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flour the work surface, not too much, just light flour so that the flour doesn't stick. I'm going to put a tiny bit on the top. That's all, not a lot. And now we're going to just flip it. This is going to be the bottom of the dough. Pick it up, a nice gentle flip. Look how beautiful this dough. Okay, so now I'm gonna put a little flour on my hand, easier to work with. You do a flip like this. It's kind of like a letter shape. Just put it up, sides come in, one side, The next side, you see how poofy it is? This is adding more air to the final dough, and it's just shaping it up nicely into a boule. We're doing a round boule today, but you could do other shapes. We pull the wings out, cross, cross. It's kind of like stitching it up. And it's a little tricky. I'm gonna put a little more dough on my hands. It's not the best one I've ever done. The dough is really full of air and nice. Wobbly. I'm gonna push that piece in. Flip it. Seal it. Look at it. Oh, it's just, look at that. Look at how soft and airy it is. So now, I'm using this type of Banetton. I'm gonna put a little bit of flour in, and actually a little bit of rice flour. It's very, very light. It won't affect the dough at all, but it will keep the dough from sticking. The dough is going to proof overnight in the fridge. You don't have to do it overnight in the fridge. I do it because it slows down the proofing, it retards the proofing, and it gives me 12 hours of flexibility. So it can be in the fridge, just slowly proofing in this bowl, and then I can get up in the morning and bake it. So it's perfect for me. And some people use a cover here. I personally love these little ridges that gives my bread a special look. I'm gonna flip it, go. And just gently handle it. Look at the nice air bubbles. But pinch it closed. You see how I had kind of like little gaping holes? That's just, you know, to make the bread shape up nicely. Looks good. I'm gonna put a little more rice flour around the edges so it doesn't stick. You'll see in the morning, it's gonna still be a little hard to get out of here, but it will get out. Don't you worry. And now we're gonna cover it with a tea towel. And then we're gonna put on our cap so that it's nice and covered in the fridge. And then we're gonna say goodnight to our dough to do its final proofing in the fridge. I'll see you in the morning. Okay, good morning. It's time to bake the bread now. This is the exciting part. Yesterday we did all that long work, and this is the payoff. So what I've done this morning is I preheated my oven to 500 degrees, which you can see, and I do it with the baking vessel opened up in there so that the baking vessel, all parts of it are so hot. So it's 500 degrees, the bell just went off, so I know it's preheated. Come over and get our beautiful dough that has fully proofed overnight out of the fridge. Oh, look at that. Do you remember what it looked like last night? Now look at it. It's risen, you know, it's not doubled in size, but look how beautiful and poofy it is. It's perfect. Look at that. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, so now, while that was preheating, I got out my parchment paper, which we're gonna use to line the baking vessel. I've got some just regular water and my little brush. You could use a spritzer. I've got my bread lathe. I just wanna be all ready. And I've got my gloves, which you need gloves that can handle up to 500 degrees because that's what it is. And I've got my temperature tool to test for doneness. So we've got all our elements, and you can take the dough right out of the fridge. You don't have to let it come to room temperature. It's fine. So look how I've just centered the parchment paper, and I put my hand there, and I give it a flip. Boop. And look at that. Oh, ho, ho, ho. There it is. All that hard work is worth it. See what I mean about the little, the design and the flour, how easily it came out because it was floured? I'm actually gonna brush a little bit of that flour off so we get a more golden crust, and you'll see what I mean in a second. I'm just gonna take a bit of that off. Some people leave it on. I don't, right now I really like the golden crust that I've been getting. So now I'm gonna apply the water. This is, instead of putting ice cubes in your stove, I just sort of paint the water all around the parchment and liberally on my dough. And what this does, this water is gonna keep the bread hydrated, and in that hot oven, it's gonna go in there and react and go right in and make a nice steam in the oven. And that's gonna give us that beautiful golden crust. It's gonna keep it moist so the bread can have a nice oven spring and expand, and all those air bubbles in there will create those nice, the crumb, the little air pockets. So this is ready now to take the lathe, and you can do all kinds of complicated, beautiful designs. I've currently been into just this, just right across the center. Give it a nice, let the bread open up, and that's gonna create this ear, it's called. You'll see where it just rises up and it kind of creates this little ear here. So now, with our gloves on, we're gonna come over to the stove. I'm gonna get closer to the stove, but you can use this, oops, sorry about that. You can use this as a transport too, carefully. The stove, and then we're gonna get our, now the bell may go off because this is very hot, but let's hope it doesn't. Woo! So much heat. Put it right into the hot baking vessel. Sometimes I use my Dutch oven, but lately I've been into this from Breadtopia, clay cloche. Lid on, back in the oven, back up there, don't get burned. Back in the hot oven. There she goes. Okay, now we're gonna take the temperature down to 475, and we're gonna set the timer for 25 minutes. And let's let the bread do her stuff. After 25 minutes, we're going to take the lid off, and I'll show you what's happening there. It's gonna be beautiful. While the bread is baking, I want to take this opportunity to talk about one of my absolute favorite places to buy a variety of different flours for baking bread. These are rye berries that I got at Main Grains. That's just one of the options. I mean, they have oatmeals, they have heritage wheat flours, they have rye flours, they have farro, they have spelt, they have bread flours. But what's really cool, if you're just starting out, they have these little sourdough starters that it's dehydrated. And the information is included, of course. Just add water. It's gonna take several days and you will have a beautiful starter. So I think that is so cool. But what's also great, I mean, I got this cute apron there. They have a cafe, they have a store. They're in beautiful Skowhegan, and which, if some of you know Maine, it used to be a bit downturned, but since they have turned the jailhouse in Skowhegan into an artisanal gristmill, it's flourishing little food hub, and it's totally worth the ride through the countryside of Maine, which is just so beautiful. So I cannot say enough. Check out their website. I'll put it in the description. And I think you'll really enjoy them. Main Grains. Okay, it's been 25 minutes. Here comes the magic. I take the lid off. Look at that ear. Do you see what I mean about the ear? And the gorgeous oven spring, how it's, oh, this is perfect. And it's golden. Okay, back in the oven, about 8 minutes now, or we'll talk about this in a second. I'm gonna put it on 8 minutes is my time for this part. You're gonna have to get used to your oven. Some people actually like to put the temperature down to 450 at this point so it doesn't get as dark on the crust. It's all about getting to know your oven and the temperatures and how long to cook the bread. It's a little bit of, you know, trial and error at the beginning, but for me it's 25 minutes at 475 and then another about 8 minutes on 475 with the lid off. Total 33, 34 minutes. So. Okay, we're getting ready. My glasses, it's so hot. Time for a temperature check, and make sure it's on Fahrenheit, because one time I left it on Celsius and I had a little issue with my bread. Anyway, we're gonna poke it right down into the middle and see if it comes up to about 190 to 200. And if not, we'll just put it back in for a few minutes. No, not even a few minutes. It's gonna be so close. You can see it already getting. I personally, they say, hi Salty. They say to go to 200. I find that's too high for me. I like to stop at about 190. And look at, okay, it's only at 169. So 170. I'm gonna put it back in for about a minute. Okay,
Salty agrees. Yes, I know. You agree. Yep.
Okay. Let's just see if it's come up to close enough for me to 190. Because you don't want gooey inside, you know. The 190 to 200 tells you it's fully cooked on the inside. Just like when you do a cake. Oh, perfect. Okay, watch. So now, this is a trick that my sister Peggy, we talked a lot about bread, as I do with my friend Kim, and Peggy gives me some good tricks. She told me to turn off the oven at this point, if I can find it, turn off the oven, leave the door open, put the bread back in, with the door open and the oven off, but not in the vessel. It's gonna make this nice and crusty. Remember, temperature's off. I'm gonna give it 4 minutes, just like that, and that's gonna give it a really nice crunch on the outside and the bottom. That's a little extra trick. Okay. So it's been in there about 4 minutes. And it really didn't get too dark. It didn't really darken up that much, but it's going to give it that extra crunch. Look at that beauty. Oh, if you could smell it. And you know who loves this rye bread? Scott and Karen Lowen. Right? Scotty, this is for you. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of our friends out there. So this, honestly, is the hardest part. You now have to wait at least 2 hours to cut into this beautiful bread. I know, and the house smells amazing, but you've got to wait. It's so important. If you cut into it now, it's just not set yet. So give it the 2 hours, and in that time, we're gonna be making our New England boiled dinner for St. Patrick's Day, one of our favorite meals. Happy St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day is hands down one of my favorite holidays, and I'm going to put some pictures up of some of our past St. Patrick's Days that we celebrated in New York City with our friends. I'll never forget, and I cherish those memories. Today we're in Miami, and I always make New England boiled dinner with corned beef, just like my mom did. I'm kind of a Puritan in that way. I like things traditional, and I don't really alter the way I do it too much. So we've got a nice 4.5 pound flat cut corned beef piece here. And you know what? I like the fat here. The marbling gives the flavor, but look at this, is a little too much. I'm gonna take out a little bit of the fat, not much, just a little. And honestly, you could leave it in, but I'm gonna take that right out. Okay. Now, usually when you buy this at the market, it comes with this little pre-pack of sort of traditional spices that you'd put on corned beef. I can deduce, although it didn't say what's in here, it looks like mustard seed, bay leaf, maybe a little fennel seed, caraway seed, red pepper flake. But do you know what? We're going to use it. I'll never waste anything. They're all flavors I love. And some people put this into the water. I actually prefer to put it right on the meat and rub it in so that you know that it's flavoring the corned beef. And I'm actually going to add more spices. This won't really be enough. I mean, it's okay. It'd be fine, but I don't, me and my flavors. This is the fat side. Flavor that too. That's going to go flat side up in the water. Put that right. Okay, that looks good. And I actually patted it dry and got a lot of the residue and blood off of it before you put it in. So I'm going to add to this spice mix, I'm going to add a couple more bay leaves, some whole cloves, some peppercorns. No, I won't add any salt because this is extremely salty. So, well, the trick, it's kind of like any holiday meal that has a big piece of meat, like turkey at Thanksgiving. This is going to take about 4 hours or 4.5 hours to get really tender. So we're starting it early. That's the trick. And then you just put it in there and kind of forget it. But this is 4.5 pounds. It's about 1 pound per hour of cooking. So I've got my favorite kitchen Dutch oven, which I believe every kitchen should have a Dutch oven. I do most of my cooking in here. And you're just gonna plop it right in, fat side up, and you're gonna make sure that the water is covering it. And you know what? I feel like I almost have too much water, but I'm gonna watch this so it doesn't boil over. And I probably could have put it in a larger Dutch oven, but it's starting to boil, so I'm gonna turn this down to simmer. I'm gonna put it on low, and then we're gonna put the cover on. And right now, because it's so bubbly, I'm gonna leave the cover sort of like that. But in a few minutes when it gets to a simmer, I'm gonna put the cover on. We're gonna let it do its thing for about 4 hours. Check it every once in a while, make sure you don't need, if you need to add water or something, but basically, how easy is that? So. Hi. I told you how much I love St. Patrick's Day. I'll say it again. I don't feel right if I don't have my New England boiled dinner or my corned beef and cabbage, as people call it, on St. Patrick's Day. So let's get to the vegetables, the all-important vegetables. So the corned beef has been simmering away and it's looking good. And you want to put, nobody likes mushy vegetables. So you're going to put your vegetables in the last half hour of cooking. So for us, we're cooking 4 hours, which would end at about 1 o'clock today. So that means by 12:30, I want to have my vegetables prepped and going into that flavored broth. So let's get to it. The classic vegetables for this meal, gotta have your cabbage. There's a beautiful head of cabbage. Cabbage and potatoes would be the traditional classic too. But I love carrots. I think the onion is necessary for the flavor. So those four are sort of the basics: the cabbage, the potatoes, the carrots, and the onions. People get even more sophisticated and fun. Turnips. Now I ordered a pack of turnips. I got one. I don't know what's happening here in Miami, but it's a pretty one. So that's going to be our vegetables, and we're going to prep it right now and put it aside. And we will add in the longer cooking vegetables first, a half hour before ending of cooking, and about 10 minutes to ending of cooking, we'll put in the chunks of cabbage because they go very quickly. And I also wanted to tell you that some people, myself included, they love a mustardy, creamy horseradish type sauce to go on the corned beef and the vegetables. So I've made that up ahead of time, and I'll put that in the description. It's just basically sour cream, lemon juice, a lot of nice Dijon mustard and horseradish and a little salt and pepper. And I'm gonna put that in the fridge just to marry the flavors until we're ready to eat. Now Pat, he won't have anything to do with this. Non-condiment man, and that's okay. To each his own. So let's get to the chopping. I find chopping very therapeutic, by the way. I'll be honest. First, let's tackle the big cabbage. You're just gonna cut away with a good knife. This is my favorite knife, by the way. I'm gonna have a whole episode on knives. But just cut away that center, okay? Put that aside. And we're gonna have two separate bowls because remember, the cabbage is gonna go in at the end. I don't know that two of us need this whole cabbage, but I may put that aside for now. I think probably this is gonna be plenty for now. So you're just gonna cut it basically into like big wedges. So you don't have to get fancy, just big hunks. We'll put that right in there. I'm gonna cut a little bit more of the core out because I see that heavy part, nobody wants that. And we'll cut this in half. And then just that. This is gonna be more than enough. But you know what I'm thinking? Because you know, I'm always like I don't waste anything. So probably we won't eat all this cabbage. But you know what I might do with it next week? Think about sweet and sour cabbage soup. So whatever's left over, I'll turn it into a soup. Nothing wasted. So now, to make it a little easier on myself, and I also like the variety of textures, I'm gonna do these whole baby potatoes. You know what I'm gonna do just to mix it up though? I'll cut a few, but I like the whole color, the red color. I'll cut a few so you see, you know, variation. But really you could leave them all, like that's so little. I don't think, I'll just cut a few, but not many. It adds a nice purpley red color. Goes in. Let's just, the onions, again, this is all very easy and rustic, and that's why I love this meal. And it's not just for St. Patrick's Day. It's, and this is any kind of cold winter in New England, like Sunday supper. Or early spring. How nice, you're out gardening in the early spring and you come in and you've got this corned beef that's been cooking all day and easy prep on the vegetables. That's nice. That's really nice. So all you're gonna do with these is just a basic, look at, that's all, quarters. Pretty simple. Do the rest. And done. So we'll put these longer cooking vegetables in about a half hour before the corned beef is done, and then at the last 10 minutes we'll put the cabbage in.
Rye loaf. Bulldog loaf.
It's been 4 hours, a little over 4 hours, and as you can see, our meat has shrunk down in size, but look how gorgeous and soft. Now here's the grain. Do you see how the grains go this way? I'm gonna cut against the grain. Look at that. Oh, it's so tender. Get right in there. This is gonna be a feast. Oh my God. It looks so succulent and juicy. This is a beauty. Look at the juice. The vegetables are done. Oh, that's gorgeous. Look at that. Okay. So now I'll cut the rest of that up and put on the platter, but the time we've all been waiting for, we're gonna cut into our beautiful bread. Okay, you ready? I might have to cut on here, or we'll try it. Moment of truth. How's the crumb? Oh. This beautiful caraway rye is going to accompany our St. Patty's Day meal. Oh, it smells so good. Okay, we'll meet you back here when it's all plated up. Okay, we're ready. Now, to me, St. Patrick's Day is really about spending time with friends, laughing, just celebrating life and enjoying good food. Even though it's quite a simple meal, it's more about who you're with and laughing and celebrating life. And I remember a special St. Patrick's Day many, many years ago in Maine. We had with our dear friends, the Bassingers, Lynn and Kathleen, and we all went down to Belfast, Maine, to this beautiful inn, and the Nappertandies were playing music. And we had a great boiled dinner. We listened to the Irish music. They were playing live, so we bought the CD. I think they're called CDs, right? DVD. And we're gonna listen to that today and just enjoy that memory of the dear Bassingers, our Irish friends. And then, you know, we all wore our Irish sweaters that Mrs. Bassinger had made for us, which in a future episode I will show you when we get more into our knitting. But that St. Patrick's Day to me is just about celebrating with friends, and I cherish all those memories. And so I hope today on this day you have a chance to celebrate with your friends. And love from Miami. Happy St. Patrick's Day.